Hey everybody, are you interested in looking at the distilling process and pairing that with key business knowledge such as finance, marketing, and operations? Then you should check out the online Distilled Spirits Business Certificate from the University of Louisville. It's an online program and can be completed in as little as 15 weeks. It's taught by both U of L business faculty and corporate fellows, so you're getting real experience from real experts at the most renowned distilleries, companies, and startups in the distilling industry. All that's required is a bachelor's degree. Go to ufl.me/pursue spirits.
So Julian, after the seminar was over, he pulled out a big friggin' pocket knife on stage and started cutting the labels. And he's like, this is how we prevent it. And I was like, how the hell did you get that through security?
Hey everyone, it is episode 220 of Bourbon Pursuit. I'm one of your hosts, Kenny, and last weekend at Bourbon Beyond, it was nothing short of incredible. We can't say thank you enough to everyone that came up and said hi to us and joined us during our sessions. We met folks from bourbon societies from Chicago and St. Louis and everywhere in between. And if you haven't done so yet, please go check out our Instagram page as well as Bourbon & Beyond's official Instagram to see all the awesome pictures. I hope you feel some FOMO and you will be there next year. And another huge shout out to Fred Minnick for including us as a regular part of the bourbon programming. It was an awesome experience, and anybody that has been there will tell you it was one for the record books. All right, it's news time, so let's dig into this. Last week, we announced the press release for the 2019 Buffalo Trace Antique Collection on our Facebook page. It's one of the most highly anticipated releases that are coming out from the fall season amongst our enthusiasts, and maybe it's also one of the most frustrating, but hats off to Sazerac for always keeping a level head and doing their best to price these at a $99 MSRP for the past few years. However, odds are it's going to be really hard to find that in most retail locations. We will be getting our samples soon, and we'll be releasing a 5-minute whiskey quickie when we get it recorded as soon as we can. New Riff is releasing a new heirloom rye called Balboa Rye. This was distilled in June of 2015 and will be 4 years old and bottled at 100 proof without chill filtration. Balboa Rye is one of the first specialties New Riff made back in 2015. Their corn farmer, Charles Fogg, had been growing heirloom rye on his family farm for many years. He's chosen a variety of was called Balboa Rye. It's an heirloom grain which dates back to the 1940s as a rye variety that's popular in Indiana. He offered it to New Riff and they distilled it into rye whiskey, probably the first time in decades that Balboa has been made into whiskey, and quite surely the only example on the market today. Balboa grain is a little smaller than modern varieties with a lower output per acre of planting. So there's just a little bit more tidbit or fact about what is Balboa Rye. This will have a suggested retail price of $49.99. As a side note, I was actually able to sample this when we recorded a podcast with Ken Lewis of New Riff a few months ago, and I'm telling you, it's going to be worth getting a bottle. Very quality rye. Kentucky Owl is going to be releasing Batch 9 in October. The latest introduction from The Wise Man's Bourbon is the boldest, highest proof addition to date from master blender Dixon Dedman. It's coming in at 127.6 proof. This release is made with 4 different distillates from 4 different mash bills, including a 15-year-old, 2 different lots of 14-year-olds, a 12-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 6-year-old distillate. Kentucky Owl Bourbon Batch 9 will be releasing 10,314 bottles into 42 U.S. states with a suggested retail price of $299.99. All right, so today's episode, it's got a lot of things wrapped up in one. This is the first release of 2 of the bourbon seminars that took place during Bourbon & Beyond. It's also the first time that we've had the Winkle family on the show before. Julian gives some history into the brand, about where they were sourcing and the timeline of when it all became part of the Sazerac portfolio as well. Then some of the juicy details start emerging. One of Julian's daughters talks about the emergence of Pappy Co and how she is more of a tequila person and never really gets to drink any of the family bourbon. Then Preston talks about their involvement with the crackdown on the secondary market Facebook groups, which He implied that it was really there as a counterfeit measuring. Now, the whole time, Fred keeps a lot of good questions rolling that you're going to find very interesting here. And the second half of this podcast is a live recording that we did at Bourbon Beyond on stage of the Community Roundtable. We share our thoughts on the festival and what we loved about it, as well as the news that broke the evening prior. There's almost too much going on, but it's timely and chock full of good nuggets that you're going to enjoy. Now, I will be the first to admit that the audio experience here is probably not going to be the best, as everyone on stage was holding a handheld microphone, and when that happens, it's going to be bumping into things. You're going to have some sound bleed that was coming from the other stages, and when we were recording this, it was feeding off of a soundboard, so we could just get the best as that we could. So sorry in advance that, really we hope that the effort that we went to actually bring this to you is worth it as well. And of course, since we weren't allowed to, there's not going to be any video available as a part of this as well. So you'll be able to just do a lot of listening. So if you're driving, then continue as normal, or walking or working out, whatever it is. But if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, we'll get you next time. I promise. All right, now let's dive in. We've got Joe over at Barrel Bourbon, and then you've got Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
Hi, this is Joe from Barrel Craft Spirits. We work with distilleries from all over the world to source and blend the best ingredients into America's most curious cask-strength whiskeys. Find out more at barrelbourbon.com.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. This past weekend was the conclusion of my Super Bowl. Bourbon and Beyond. Leon Bridges, Alison Krauss, ZZ Top, Foo Fighters, John Fogerty, Zach Brown Band. Oh my gosh, there were so many great headliners, including Robert Plant himself from Led Zeppelin. And he didn't just come out playing his stuff from his bluegrass days. He was singing Led Zeppelin. Bourbon and Beyond was so amazing. And I am honored to be its curator and a co-founder in the festival. My baby is the Kentucky Gold Stage. And what happened on the bourbon workshops is absolutely historic. You had Jordan from Breaking Bourbon. You had Blake from Bourboner. Kenny and Ryan were up there. Carla Carlton, the managing editor for Bourbon Plus. Susan Riegler, Fawn Weaver, Peggy No Stevens. On and on and on. So many wonderful, talented bourbon people were on that stage dropping knowledge, and it was just fantastic. The crowds were packed. You could not get a place to get a tasting, and people were just standing way in the back by the gates, just listening to people talk about bourbon. This was unprecedented. Even in years past, we didn't draw these kinds of crowds around the bourbon workshops. And if you were one of those people and you were there listening to the Van Winkles talk about their family heritage, you learned something so breaking for like our little world, this little bubble that we call bourbon. And that was when Preston Van Winkle said that his family worked with Facebook legally to take down the secondary markets. I was stunned by it. But I want to give you some context into this whole format of the festival. The Kentucky Gold Stage is to the left and about a half a football field to 3/4 of a football field away from, or about a football field away from the main stages. And while we are talking, musicians are playing, so there's sound bleed into us. Now, because the panelists are speaking into the microphone, the people in the audience can hear them. But on the stage, we often, depending on the musician, we can hear more of the music than some of the panelists to our left or right. And also, we were instructed by our stage manager to really get into the microphone and not yell, but speak very thoroughly and deeply. So the recording you're about to hear it sounds much, much different than what it was like for me on stage. So I was instructed to speak loudly into the microphone, and so it's going to sound like I'm screaming a little bit, but really I'm talking to the crowd, not necessarily speaking to be recorded. So that over excitement, that's a stage voice. That's kind of my way to speak to the crowd. And the Van Winkles, they're also speaking a little louder, but they're not as loud as me. So as you will soon learn. So this was recorded by Bourbon Pursuit at the Bourbon and Beyond Festival. And it's definitely a voice I would not use for normal recording. With that said, I have been working with the Van Winkles for 2 years to get them on stage at Bourbon and Beyond. And last year we got rained out, so they couldn't come on. This year they donated 3 bottles of Pappy Van Winkle and told us a lot about their struggles coming through the bourbon business and how he almost gave it up. But it wasn't until Preston Van Winkle started talking about how he feels about the secondary market and the counterfeiters and the flippers that my jaw just dropped. I was not expecting that on the stage. Not at all. So sit back, enjoy, and listen, and just know that this was recorded around a couple thousand people. And that's this week's Above the Char. Hey, if you have an idea for Above the Char, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at Fred Minnick. Again, at Fred Minnick. Until next week, cheers.
Hey guys, my name is Jackie Zyke and I'm the master taster for Old Forester. And my dear friend Fred Minnick has actually been so nice to let me MC this stage for Bourbon Beyond this year. And he's a man who has done so much for this bourbon industry, and he really is shaping how we are experiencing bourbon today. Obviously, look at all of us here together. Let's hear it for Fred Minnick. And I mean, he's the only one that wears an ascot when it's 100 degrees outside, so, you know, just for that alone, you deserve an applause.
Thank you very much. It's because I have a very ugly neck. Well, Jackie, I am so excited about this particular seminar. Look at all the people who are here to hear the story about Pappy Van Winkle. All right, joining me on the stage, Carrie Greener. Carrie, come on. Pappy Co, the son of Julian Van Winkle. Her brother, Preston Van Winkle. He's the guy who gets all the hate emails when somebody can't get Pappy. And the men, the myth, the legend, Julian Van Winkle, who brought his grandfather's name back. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to one of the greatest palates of the 20th century, Julian Van Winkle. So, Van Winkles, thank you very much for taking the stage with me at Bourbon and Beyond. And I met you backstage, and I was so disappointed in all of you.
95 degrees, Fred.
Were they drinking bourbon? No.
No.
Were they drinking water? No. Were they drinking Irish whiskey, scotch, brandy, or a beer? No. What were they drinking? Vodka.
It's hot.
Julian, if Pappy had known that his grandson and great-grandson and great-granddaughter were drinking vodka before they were going on the stage to talk about their family legacy, what do you think he would say?
Smart guy. When I take a drink, I like a lot of flow into my throat when it's hot. So if I did that with bourbon or some other brown spirit, it would be an ugly afternoon or ugly evening. So vodka's a little kinder to the brain than some of the other whiskeys. So.
All right, well, the vodka's gotten too much stage time as it is.
Exactly.
So let's move on. I want to talk about what it was like growing up in the Van Winkle household, because your dad was out trying to promote American whiskey when nobody wanted to drink it. What was it like seeing your dad out on the pavement trying to sell whiskey?
Well, it wasn't easy at all. Actually, looking back, he has scars on his head and
From what? Warehouses, right?
Yeah, from warehouses. So when we were little, he'd leave really early in the morning. He was into distilling the bourbon down in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and so it was not anything pretty, what you might imagine. It was no Camelot from back at the Stitzelweller days. It was full-on grunt work. And he would sprain his ankle, and he would leave early and come home late. And luckily on the weekends we would go down there to Lawrenceburg with him. So for us it was an amazing childhood. He wasn't gone all the time because luckily we were able to be there with him and enjoy the bottling plant. And it was right on a creek in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. It was like a dilapidated building, but he was just working hard all day, every day, making it work, and we were there playing along with him. So,
Now, Preston, I know you pretty well. Did you ever sneak in there and steal a little whiskey from your dad when you were growing up?
Steal whiskey like from the liquor cabinet or from the bottling hall?
So there are multiple places you were stealing whiskey.
Actually, by the time I was able to appreciate it, there wasn't really anything to steal. It was under lock and key pretty well, and I was working for Dad. So, but I do remember, pinching a bottle here or there of some old stuff that was it wasn't anything good. It was stuff that was ultimately sold in Japan because that was the only place you could get rid of it.
And now it's selling for $5,000 on the secondary market.
There's none of it left, thankfully. Our family had nothing to do with the distillation of that particular product, but the labels were popping off of the bottles, and they had been in the warehouse for a good many years. But in terms of stealing booze from Dad, my sisters were not quite as good at it.
Oh.
Frozen bottles of vodka in the
we
freezer.
were still drinking vodka back then. We hadn't gotten
Okay.
into bourbon
All
yet.
right. All right. Let's just go ahead and have.
You brought it up, Fred, is all I got to say.
It's true. That's fair.
We drink bourbon if it was a cool September day, but it's just not that yet. So
All right.
we're getting there.
Okay. All right. So, Julian, did you ever have you were on the road a lot trying to make Pappy Van Winkle or Old Rip Van Winkle work? What was it like in bourbon in the 1980s and 1990s when nobody wanted it?
Well, it was a struggle. My dad, of course, started working for him in 1977, and at that point, the bourbon part was not popular, so all the distilleries put their product into canners, and some ugly, some fantastic, but that's what it took to sell the whiskey, was put it in a figurine or an apothecary bottle or something. So that was the hard sell, is to get a liquor store in Prospect, Kentucky or wherever to pay $8 wholesale for a bottle of whiskey back then, which would sell for 12 or 15 maybe. So that was the hard part. And to sell a bottle of whiskey, just our old Rip Van Winkle, was next to impossible. But it was bottle by bottle and so forth. So it was quite something. It was an uphill battle, to say the least.
Now, you also used your whiskey as currency. Like you would barter with it. You would trade a couple bottles or a case for a magazine advertisement in those days.
Yes, we fellow that we ended up meeting through the horse business in Lexington did some advertising. He was from New York. He came down to the distillery and found out about our whiskey because his customer, who was a horse farm owner, enjoyed the whiskey and found out about it. And he actually he bought a case from the distillery and took a case of whiskey with him on the airplane and put it in the overhead. So that was hilarious. But we did barter for advertising because I didn't have any money to pay for advertising. So we did barter, it worked. Is all I got to say.
Would you say that there was ever a moment that you were in jeopardy of closing the company?
I would say that would happen about once a month.
Wow.
Seriously, and I'm not being facetious. I would say that the timing was perfect on this. It was I was buying whiskey by the barrel, and occasionally the distilleries would change their mind and not sell me any barrels. And I was buying whiskey from several different distilleries, as many distilleries did back then. There was a lot of whiskey being traded around. The label that you bought under that distillery was not necessarily from that distillery. And that still happens today, obviously, too. But I did a lot of, got nixed on buying barrels, so I was turned down, and I thought, well, this is it. I'm done here. But it's the only thing I knew how to do. My dad wanted me to work for a banker or sell insurance or something, and I said, well, that's no fun. I'm just going to stick with this. And it was more tenacity than anything because I had no other choice, and just stuck with it. And obviously, it kind of worked out.
Well, what do you all think? Are you all glad that he stuck with it? Now, I think...
I am.
Preston definitely is. Did you, as a child, did you feel that stress that your father was going through?
That's hard to say. I could tell that he was overworked a lot of times, but at the same time, even with the early mornings and late nights, he usually made it home for dinner. A lot of times with a sack of sliders or a box of club sandwiches from Men's Cafe down on Story Avenue. But he usually made it home for dinner. So I don't guess I felt the stress so much, because when we'd go down and help him in the bottling hall, it was fun. He made it fun. We helped fill bottles, put labels on. I remember one day filling like 1,000 Statue of Liberty 50 ml decanters with a soda fountain gun with my cousins. So the stress was kind of taken out of it. And he always made time for going to Louisville Redbirds games and Louisville Thunder games and the hockey team, the River Frogs. So we always had, he always made time for us as kids. So I don't know that I felt the stress. I feel like the only time I really realized that things were getting tough was when a group of Japanese buyers came over, and like if they didn't have a good time, that was it. Like that could have been the end of the road. But they had a great time. We took them and played golf. I caddied for them, and it was one of the most funniest experiences of my life. But that was probably the only time that I really recognized that things could be a little bit, on thin ice.
So, Carrie, do you feel like your dad ever brought the work problems home?
No, and I think we actually learned that from him. It's like you just work hard, put your head down during the day, and then you try to cut it off at night. And yeah, so we just knew he worked hard, but did not feel that. Like Preston said, he was there the night and on the weekends, and I never felt anything like that.
I think that's a testament to you, Julian. I admit I bring work home. It's hard. It's really, really hard.
Well, I think too when you don't have any other way of being and it's all you know, that you don't really have any other way of doing it. So it was the only way he knew how, and luckily it was being a dad and being a great family member and just working hard. It's like and the whole theme here for me and all of this is like it's all you know, it's all you do, and when you work hard and you just do what's right and real, it all works out.
Now, Carrie is one of three. She is a triplet. And I've actually never asked Julian this. Has there ever been a moment with your triplets that you mistook one of them for the other?
Mostly when they're walking down the hall from the back, I would always say, Carrie Louise, whatever, and it would be the other one, because from the front, since I've known him since day one, it's a little easier, but I have mistaken him. And on the phone, phone conversation, especially, in the last several years, Carrie lives in Idaho, and everybody lives here now, but then we'll call up, and I think I'm talking to Louise, and it's Carrie or something. So it is a little confusing. We just a real quick story. Went to Target one day, and they were really small, and I'm checking out, and this little fellow's checking me out, and he's going, "Is that three twins?" Because it's hard to describe, what you're looking at. Because triplets are a little different than twins. A lot of twins, but we did get them confused. We had a magic marker on one of the girls when they were first born on their heel.
Not to mention he was 30 and he had 4 children. He had Preston, and then within a year and a half he had 3 more. And looking back, at age 30, to see what he was able to do with his career and raise children and do it so gracefully.
Please give your mother some credit for the raising of the children.
Yeah. Thank God he had her as a guide. She should have come so she could have heard that,
But she's babysitting some grandchildren.
yeah.
You just mentioned that you were on the verge of closing your company. And then something happened in the 1990s. You got a perfect score. And everybody wanted Pappy. Tell me about that big moment of when you kind of turned the corner, when you knew that you wouldn't have to close your doors. Tell me about that, Julian.
Well, the story was we sent our distributor in Chicago, unbeknownst to me, sent a sample to the Beverage Tasting Institute for the the World Beverage Tasting. What do they call it? The Beverage Tasting?
Tasting Institute.
World Whiskey Competition or something, and we got a 99, and they published that in a wine magazine called The Wine Enthusiast, and I got out into the trade, and then our phones started ringing, and that was really kind of the kickoff of, you all know wine, vodka, whiskey, anything, when it gets a good rating, you want it, even though you have no idea if you'll like it or not, because that guy over there might like something, and that guy over there might like something, and they're completely different tasting. But we got lucky and got some publicity, and that's kind of when it started. So the phone started ringing, and it kind of not really took off. But that was the genesis of this whole thing, I think, which was pure luck, really, as far as getting in that tasting. And a lot of this is luck, believe me.
And what was the move over when you chose to partner with Buffalo Trace? What was your thinking behind going to partner with Buffalo Trace?
Well, they actually knocked on my door a year before we hooked up, and wanted, because they owned one of our brands, W.L. Weller, which my granddad used to work for Mr. Weller here in Louisville. And Diageo had owned the brands. They ran all those brands into the ground pretty much because they didn't sell well for them. So they sold them all off, and Buffalo Trace bought W.L. Weller. And they had it since 1999. So in 2001, they asked me to do a joint venture with them. And I wasn't interested because I've been working by myself, for myself, except for my son, for a long time. So it was foreign to me to work with anybody for anybody, and not especially for anybody. But I finally smartened up after a little discussions with them, and I knew that I wasn't making whiskey for the future. I was buying aged bourbon, which was available back then, but down the road, it's the way you have to think in the bourbon market. Our business plan is 23 years long. I don't know what you all do, but we have the longest business plan next to a lumber person who grows an 80-year-old white oak tree. It's pretty incredible. So I needed future whiskey to put down for the future. So that's why mainly we hooked up with them. Plus, they were making Weller, and same formula as ours, which is still my grandfather's formula. So it was a great moment. So and it's been a great relationship, and they're as soon as we hooked up with them, the marketing and the sales force and the promotion, that's it's a little bit overdone, I guess, because we really don't need to market this brand, but we did back in the day, and it's taken off, and it's been incredible. It really has. But Sazerac Buffalo Trace has really been a big part of it.
And it doesn't hurt that Harlan Wheatley's the best distiller of American whiskey out there.
He's pretty good.
He's won a lot of awards for sure.
He wins a lot of awards.
Yeah, he runs a tight ship. He's actually a real master distiller.
Yes, it's not a title that was given to him easily.
No, he's not a marketer.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
One of the things with the rise of Pappy and everybody, standing in long lines, there's been a little bit of vitriolic kind of nature come your way. And Carrie, you and I have talked about this sometimes. How does that make you feel when you see people lamenting about the fact they can't get a glass of Pappy, or they're throwing out some kind of crazy conspiracy theory?
Don't get me started.
Well, that's why we're here. I'm here to get you started.
Easy carry. Hold your.
Listen,
I don't work for the distillery, just so you know, so I can't say too much.
notice I asked Carrie this question.
Well, I'll just say I have my own company that I started 6 years ago with my sisters, Pappy Co, which is the merchandise side of our business. And so we get a lot of inquiries just because we're obviously within the family realm of business. And so there's a lot of haters out there, and it's very easy to respond to those haters. And what I say is that, I think when people understand the nature of the business and the nature of our brand, it becomes very clear that, I would love for you to be an appreciator and a respecter of the brand and understand it. And so I think the easiest thing to tell people is that if you think about, the youngest age that we bottle is 10 years, and it goes up to 23 years. So not many other people have to plan ahead in that kind of increment. So when I think they realize that this is not an intentional thing that we've done, we haven't intentionally held back product to increase demand. We have not worked with, or they have not worked with a marketing team to create anything. It's literally creating a product that you believe in, and the rest happens naturally and organically. So we're no cult brand that we've tried to create. It's literally, like we've said from the very beginning, putting your head down and working. And so when people really understand that and see that it's nothing about marketing, the world we live in is so fake, full of just creating a brand and creating this fake story behind it and going out there and selling it. It's like we are caught up in that. And so I can understand that maybe if you don't know enough about the brand, that's your first instinct is to completely judge and say, oh, it's it's intentional, and you learn a little bit more. It's very easy to then be an appreciator of the brand.
Now, Preston, you actually deal with the haters on a regular basis. What's it like?
Daily. There are a lot of misconceptions with our brands. There's a lot of there are a lot of people that I guess are, for lack of a better term, butthurt that they can't get our product. So they would rather spew hatred than just accept the reality that this has happened organically. It's not. It wasn't an intentional thing that we've created. Artificial demand. People accuse us of creating artificial demand to increase prices. Well, we're not the ones benefiting from these crazy aftermarket prices. It's the retailers that are benefiting. It's the people that are illegally buying and selling via Craigslist and Facebook and stuff that are benefiting. It's not us. And it would be asinine to hold back product that we could profit from selling in order to, again, artificially create demand. It is what it is. We're not making chairs or fidget spinners. We're making 10 to 23-year-old bourbon, so it takes time. Nobody could have anticipated the explosion in demand for bourbon in general, but especially premium bourbons, and our bourbons especially, 15, 20 years ago, when it would have mattered from a production standpoint. So we basically got caught with our pants down. So we can't catch up instantly. We are trying to catch up. We've got more 10, 12, and 15-year-old than we've ever had, but it's still a drop in the bucket compared to demand. Demand is going up like this while supply is kind of ratcheting up at a slower pace. And we are increasing production every year, but we're doing so at a what most would consider a pretty conservative rate. Because if this whole thing goes kaput, if this whole bourbon boom goes bust, we don't want to be sitting on top of a lake of whiskey we can't sell. We've been on that side of the coin, and that's basically what forced my grandfather to sell Stitzelweller in the early 70s. Was nobody cared about bourbon at that point, so we don't want to be on that side of the coin again.
And actually, Julian, your father gave an interview to a North Carolina newspaper in the 1970s, saying that if you think you can sell 5,000 bottles, make 2,000. If you think you can sell 10,000, make 5,000. So it seems to be like very much ingrained in the DNA of the Van Winkles to make less than the demand is.
It is. It's obviously when you grow up with something and that's in the back of your head. Pappy always said, "Find bourbon, profit." Yada yada yada. But always find bourbon, profit, loss, whatever. But I don't care what you do, and that's. I got to keep my mouth shut here a little bit. But with any product, if you make too much of it and the quality goes down, your price that you're going to get for it also goes down. And if you keep the quality up there and the quantity reasonable, I think your business plan is a lot better. We're comfortable with the business we have. We don't have, and it's different. We don't have stockholders behind us. You're looking at the stockholders of some of them right here in our company, all 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of us. We don't have anybody to answer to. So that's the problem with the big companies. They have to make money. Quality goes down. So that's something we're not gonna do that.
So what is the relationship with Buffalo Trace from a business perspective? Can they dictate to you your whiskey supply, where you store your barrels?
It's complicated, but basically we own the brand. We own 51% of our brand. So it's a joint venture. So it's all one big happy family. So if there's big business decision to be made, we have the final word on it.
So when they're distilling the wheated bourbon recipe, is it Pappy Van Winkle Day and they put it in there, or is it all Weller and Pappy Van Winkle Day, and then you guys get barrels and you just choose where? How does that work?
Wheat production is wheat production, and then within the Buffalo Trace campus, there are certain warehouses. There are certain spots within certain warehouses that have shown over decades that they produce the best finished product, especially at our age statements. So we get first crack at the best of the barrels. So when a barrel is produced at Buffalo Trace with the wheated recipe, it's not earmarked necessarily for Weller or 10-year-old Rip or 15-year-old Pappy or 23-year-old Pappy or whatever. It's more about where it ends up in a warehouse based on space constraints. And they're building 2 new warehouses a year for the next 10 years to the tune of about $1.2 billion.
So what I just heard there is that William LaRue Weller cask strength was not good enough to be Pappy.
Not necessarily.
No, that's not what I heard.
Okay, well.
Not necessarily.
Gary's giving me the evil eye.
There are certainly barrels that we reject that on their own would be just fine.
Yeah.
But they're just not up to our, I don't want to say standards, but our palates are very laser focused on our products. People have described both of us as having these amazing palates. But
that's why we need to get involved.
It's more that our palates are laser focused on what we produce.
And what we have produced
and what we
in the
like.
past and what we like.
We're very fortunate that other people seem to enjoy the same things that we like.
I do believe that there is a gift in the palate of being able to mingle 2 or 3 barrels or 5 barrels or whatever to make a batch. A lot of people can pick a single barrel, but to create like a batch, that's a gift. That's a gift. Julian, does Preston have the same touch as you?
He's always had it, and I noticed that from the get-go, but you will find this out someday. As you get older, your flavor ability to smell and taste goes away a little bit. So, and of course, we're all different. Our DNA is different, but he's really good at it, and I'm thankful to have him and the staff at Buffalo Trace who do it every single day, taste different whiskeys. But it's quite an art, and he's got a nice little palate.
What about Carrie? Have you brought her in on the fold?
Not yet, but I think she's looking forward to getting in there someday.
What do we got to do, Carrie? What do we got to do to
gotta
get
move
you
down
on
to
the
Kentucky
a little older,
first.
I don't know, but
She lives in Idaho. That's a
have
big
a lot
problem.
of-
Oh, it starts with moving to from Idaho to Kentucky.
Jean and Louise live here, so.
That's true. You could get 2 of the triplets.
Yeah, if you all died tomorrow, what would you do? You know, we got to start
Oh, there
learning
you go.
this.
Thanks.
Carrie, do you got a plan we need to
Louise
know
likes
about?
tequila.
No, I don't. I just, you know.
The more she talks, the more I think she's going to bump us off.
I just know we have 3 valuable palettes on the sidelines. We could always learn that palette. You know, we're just all joking.
So
and stuff,
here's
but
an idea. Here's an idea. You could come out with a new brand, call it Triplet Van Winkle.
Tequila.
Tequila.
They're all tequila drinkers before they drink bourbon.
You know, Triplet Tequila brand.
Oh, so
Just watch
I think
out.
therein, Carrie, is why you're not being asked to join these panels.
Just ruling
Not
myself
any
out
good.
real fast.
It doesn't taste like tequila. In 2013, I was a rookie judge on the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. I tasted this bourbon. We tasted a lot of different bourbons, and I remember tasting one. I was like, I bet that's Pappy. It's really fucking good. I hope it doesn't win, even though I voted for it to win because of the Pappy hype, right? I didn't want more Pappy hysteria. And sure enough, it won. It was the Pappy Van Winkle 15-year-old. This happens to be my favorite expression that you all put out. Is it yours too? Carrie, do you have a favorite expression of Pappy that's not
She's
tequila?
a tequila drinker.
I love bourbon. I love our bourbon, but I honestly don't get to drink enough of it to be able to give a really strong opinion on that.
But she still would like to be a taster.
Yeah.
I have a lot to learn, but I do appreciate it very much.
I think I know someone you can learn from.
Right.
So you don't have a favorite expression of your family's heritage?
Honestly, truthfully, I don't get to drink it enough to really be able to pick up on that. I do know that I think
Her
recently,
husband drinks it all before she gets a chance to.
I think I've had most recently like the 20-year, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, no wonder people love it. That is insanely delicious. It's like dessert to me, and so I think I probably would go not for the 15-year because it's a little hot for me. So I'd probably go with the 20-year if I had to give an answer.
Okay. Well, there we go. We've
I do
got a
actually
basis.
have something to say.
There we go. So in the bourbon business, they like to say, when you ask them how should you drink it, they usually say, drink it however you like. So I'm going to ask everyone up here, is it okay to drink Pappy 23-year-old with Coca-Cola?
Maybe Mexican Coke. It's pretty good with that. But no.
No,
That's
but
pushing it.
that's pushing it exactly. But
I don't know why you would.
Fred, what are you doing?
Why would? Yes, if you've got.
They
if you've
warned
got
me they
a-
were going to push back.
If you've got a few cases of 23-year-old Pappy and you got the money to burn, hey, whatever. But otherwise, why would you want to do that? You could get a perfectly good bottle of 4-year-old bourbon to mix with your Coke.
I'll just say that I guess a lot of other people besides us take it a lot more seriously than we do. And so I'll just say, people, especially with Pappy and Company, we make cocktails and mixed drinks, and people kind of can give us a bad rap for that. It's like, you know what? We love old fashions. We love Manhattans. We like bourbon cocktails. We like all kinds of mixed drinks. And so there's no harm in that. So people definitely will say that to mix anything with any of our products, even ice, is wrong, but it's so not wrong.
What's the future for Old Rip Van Winkle? Can we see a distillery? Are we going to continue on the same model?
Are you talking to Dad and Preston or me?
Are you going to start a distillery?
It's way too expensive.
We're good. Thanks. I would have done it a long time ago, but, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I would like to, but we definitely could change some distilling at Buffalo Trace to differentiate the Van Winkle from the Weller for sure. We're working on that, so to be continued. But it's a huge proposition and tons of money, and you can go broke aging whiskey for 23 years is all I got to say. So there's a lot of craft distillers out there, and they will soon find out what it takes to hold on to whiskey for a long period of time. It's incredible.
Not only that, but like starting a distillery, you're looking at like an entirely new machine making your product, and you're like, it's a gamble. You know, who knows what's going to be any good?
Exactly. Yeast, distilling equipment, it's all changes everything. So people say, well, just make it over there. We made it there. You can't do that. Water, yeast, equipment, copper, stainless, it's a lot of variables.
So staying on the future of Pappy, we talked about pricing a little bit. And I was just at an auction. I emceed an auction at the Speed Museum on Thursday, where a lot of Pappy went for $17,500. A little bit of change there that someone wanted to spend on some Pappy. And the market continually shows that it will bear, you could triple your SRP and the market would still accept it. Is there any thought about increasing your price, your SRP?
We've taken price increases like every other year has kind of been our model, at a pretty conservative rate. Our feeling is these brands were built on the backs of people who were willing to spend the money on a product that was more expensive than the average bourbon, and now it's gotten to the point where, you know, when 50 or 60 or 80 bucks was kind of the top end that people were willing to spend on a bourbon, those people are now spending $200, $300, $400, $500 on a bottle. We don't want to price those people out of the market for our products.
But
yes,
there's still a slim chance they're going to get it, though.
Yeah, we've taken a very minor price increase that will hit stores this year. It's still nothing compared to the Craigslist prices and the aftermarket prices, whatever. But it's the assholes in the retail shops and on Craigslist that are making all the money, not us. So if they're going to charge that, they're going to charge whatever they're going to charge. We can't control it legally anyway. We're doing okay. We're going to continue to price where we think that the suggested retail price should be, and hope that retailers will fall in line. We and Buffalo Trace have taken some steps to kind of curb the secondary market.
What steps have you taken? Do you feel like
there are a lot of dollars being thrown from a legal standpoint at getting Facebook groups shut down?
So you all contributed to shutting down the Facebook secondary markets?
Yeah, it's illegal. Firstly, it's illegal, and secondly, it makes it harder for these folks to get a bottle at a fair price, which has never sat right with us.
You also don't know what you're getting in a bottle because there are tons of counterfeiters. So if you take one thing away from this little loud conference here we're having today, thank God our music is good. If you buy something on the secondary market, you cannot guarantee what's going to be in that bottle. So our business was spread on word of mouth. If you will please spread this one thing, don't buy on the secondary market because you cannot guarantee what's in that bottle because the counterfeiters are really good. If they would put their effort into a legal deal, they'd be billionaires, but they choose to be illegal. And you don't know what you're going to get.
It costs $1,500 to get one of those capsule spinners, and it costs probably another $300 or $400 to get a box of those capsules, foil capsules. And if you're selling $0 whiskey for $3,000. It's a pretty good investment if you're a counterfeiter.
You can get on eBay right now and find empty bottles of Pappy.
They're going to be filled someday.
Yeah,
So,
those bottles get refilled for sure.
Anybody got a good eBay account I can partner with you on for these 2 bottles? I was joking.
I'm going to take those
joking.
to it. Smash them.
I was joking. Actually, I can tell you weren't laughing about that. You really take this seriously.
Very seriously, yeah. I actually had a consumer email me the other day and said, hey, I found a case of empties. Can I send them to you for a second life? We don't have any, there's nothing we can do with them legally. So I just asked them to either scrape off the labels or smash the bottles to avoid them ending up on the secondary market, because there are countless instances of people selling a bottle on eBay and that exact same bottle ending up on Craigslist or in a Facebook group for sale again full. Selling an empty, and then that full bottle reappears.
If you could be in a room with a known counterfeiter, one-on-one, who was reselling, what would you say or do to that person?
I would get arrested at the end of it. It'd be ugly.
Wow.
I would force a gallon of cachaça.
Cachaça.
Cachaça, the Brazilian
stuff, down his throat or her throat.
Soju. Yeah.
I just don't like cachaça.
I'd make them drink the whole bottle of whatever rot gut they put in the bottle and hope that it was poisonous.
Wow.
And we're deadly serious about this.
We're just trying to protect our customers.
Yeah,
That's all.
trying to protect the consumer, and we put out what we feel is a high quality product, and for somebody else to benefit from that assumed quality when there is none is disheartening.
I hear that. The other side is for a lot of consumers. There's a lot of people who will never get in reach or be able to buy a bottle. It's just very difficult to buy one. And, those secondary markets, for some people that provided an opportunity in some ways. I mean, what do you think about that? In some ways, it could have been like an extension.
If it's real, though, right?
If it's
but
real.
That's the problem.
So, do you feel like there's a solution there? Because I know you want to protect customers, but there's not a lot of Pappy to get to the customers, and that's been the hard part.
It's a fine line. It really is. We hate to turn down, I hate it that people don't get to enjoy our whiskey. I said, well, go to a bar where they sell it for a decent price. You can try, because it's sometimes more available in a bar. But it is a fine line we have to tread there. So we're just trying to convince people to be careful and not go to the secondary market, because the thing in Costa Rica or somewhere, or Haiti or somewhere, was somewhere in the Caribbean there where people were poisoned by drinking.
There's people literally dying.
Central America, I think. A mini bar. It was poisoned. So that's the bad part.
Well,
it happens every day all over the world. Somebody dying from illicit alcohol. It just doesn't get reported because it wasn't an American tourist at a all-inclusive resort in the Caribbean. It happens every single day in the UK, India, Russia, all over the world.
Well, I've been giving that sign, which means I have to close it here. And we were just kind of getting some good stuff. And Julian, I always love being on the stage with you. You're a fun person to talk to on the stage. Preston, Carey, I think this is the first time we've interacted like this, and you guys were awesome. How about it, ladies and gentlemen, for the Van Winkles?
Thanks, Fred. Thank you all for coming.
I will say one thing. There will never be a vodka and beyond. I just put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Thanks, Julian, for the vodka hate there.
The 2019 Kentucky's Edge Bourbon Conference and Festival pairs all things Kentucky with bourbon. It takes place October 4th and 5th at venues throughout Covington and Newport, Kentucky. Kentucky's Edge features a bourbon conference, music, tastings, pairings, tours, and an artisan market. Kentucky's Edge 2019 is where bourbon begins. Tickets and information can be found online at kentuckysedge.com. There are more craft distilleries popping up around the country now more than ever. So how do you find out the best stories and the best flavors? Well, Rack House Whiskey Club, it's a Whiskey of the Month club, and they are on a mission to uncover the best flavors and stories that craft distilleries across the U.S. have to offer. Rack House's box ship out every 2 months to 40 states. In Rack House's October box, they're featuring a distillery with an interesting ingredient: water from the Bull Run watershed that has been protected by Congress since the 1870s. Rack House Whiskey Club is shipping out 2 bottles for the Bull Run Distilling Company out of Portland, Oregon, including a Pinot Noir finished American whiskey. Go to rackhousewhiskeyclub.com to check it out and try some for yourself. Use code PURSUIT for $25 off your first box. 291 Colorado Whiskey aims to create a one-of-a-kind, bold, and beautiful Colorado whiskey. Rugged, refined, rebellious. Distillery 291 is an award-winning, small-batch whiskey distillery located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, nestled in the shadow of Pikes Peak. Owner and founding distiller Michael Myers grew up on family farms in Georgia and Tennessee, across the countryside defined by rolling hills, horses, and whiskey. He set out to create a flagship whiskey that evoked the Wild West, a cowboy walking to a bar saying, "Give me a whiskey," and the bartender slamming down a bottle of 291 Colorado whiskey. Find a bottle near you at 291coloradowhiskey.com. Ride it like you stole it, drink it like you own it. Live fast, drink responsibly.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bourbon Beyond. This right here is the Bourbon Pursuit Roundtable. We are joined here with my podcasting partner, Kenny Coleman, and we've got Brian of Sippin' Corn, Blake, also known as Cal Ripken of Bourboner, and Jordan from Breaking Bourbon, and of course our MC and master taster for Old Forester, Jackie Zykin. What's up, everybody?
Yo.
Final day. I mean, I don't know about you all. I think our age is starting to show. My back's already hurting. I don't know about you all.
It's been a long few days.
Well, last night, standing up for a while hurt a little bit, but hey.
Well, I'm wondering, hey, Jackie, does being barefooted help you with the back and stuff?
It does. It helps me ground and center.
Yeah, you know, the barefoot movement is real. I learned about this, and these things are practically barefoot. So anyway, so we're at Bourbon and Beyond, and everybody up here is on a panel or has been on the stage, and we've all been moderators or an MC the whole time. And I just want to get a quick thought of what you've learned or what were some of your takeaways from your panels or what you've listened to. We'll start with you, Brian.
Sure, I did the Whiskey's Dark Past, and the amount of knowledge that we had from Chris Morris and Bernie Lubbers and Susan Riegler was just amazing. I don't think you can get 3 more knowledgeable people on stage at once. And we focused on lawlessness. I sort of focus on the law, so it was the opposite of what I normally do. But it was great and a great opportunity to have that. So thanks, Fred.
What was a good, juicy story that came out of there?
Well, I thought Chris was going to say that the Prohibition style 1920 evoked the lawlessness, and he actually went the opposite direction and said Brown-Forman's focusing on law, on them being within the law during Prohibition and having one of the medicinal licenses. So that was the one thing that surprised me, but the juiciest things I think came from Bernie and Susan about George Remus, and that's where you really get into the murders. You got a guy who goes to jail during Prohibition, gets out, murders his wife in front of everybody in Cincinnati, and gets off on one of the first uses of the insanity defense. So a lot of great stories on the lawlessness side of bourbon.
That's what we consider a great story.
Yeah. One other thing is that Brown-Forman actually bought bourbon from George Remus through his secretary after he was in jail. So the government would allow people, they would seize the bootleggers' barrels and then sell them back to distillers. So I think that the government was really double dipping back in Prohibition.
Probably triple dipping.
Yep.
They would tax it after that, so
that's
it'd be
right.
a third chance.
So Blake, what have you learned out here today?
Yeah,
or
so
last few days?
My seminar is still to come this afternoon, so you'll get to hear me twice today, which I'm sure is exciting. So it's going to be on sweet mash versus sour mash, and we have Pat Heiss from Wilderness Trail and then Caleb from Peerless. So I'm excited for that one. But, all the seminars have been great. I think there was a lot of stuff that popped up in the Master Distiller panel on Friday, as well as the Van Winkle one. That one definitely had a lot of cool details coming out of it. So it's cool just to see people kind of up close in a little more laid back setting where give somebody some bourbon and you don't always get the same PR answer as you may get in a normal interview.
You let the secrets start flowing. Yeah. That's what we want.
That's kind of been my vision in curating these panels.
Get people drunk and ask them questions.
They would
Free pours.
People talk, and they're very different, and you can't. It's not like a camera interview or anything like that. It's not to say that we're trying to get gotcha questions or anything, but the distilleries don't always realize that their marketing goes against them because they don't let the real stories come out, and the real stories to me are always so much better. I'm curious. Blake, I didn't get to catch the Master Distiller one. Was there a good real story in there that really caught your attention?
I think just the question was brought up about should there be like a union of master distillers, or what does that really mean? And you hear them all, just kind of the respect. It's like, no, we don't need a union, but we don't want somebody just popping up and using the name as well. Like, master is just somebody who has all this experience. And then I think it was in this one, but the kind of the quote that stands out to me is Trip Simpson from Barrel Bourbon. He says, garbage in, garbage out. Like, you gotta, as a master, you gotta know the process from beginning to end, and it doesn't just stop at distillation or in the barrel. And so, just they have to oversee the entire process, which is interesting.
And most of them say that the proof is in their whiskey.
Yeah.
Right. That's what they want to say it, and maybe they should also keep a shame list if they want to make sure that there's this list of people that take the name. Like, there's just all backdoor kind of stories between them.
Yeah, you emceed the What is a Master Distiller?
I did.
What was that like for you?
It was good. It's a good melting of minds of everybody that we'd had on the podcast before to come up and kind of talk, but also in more of a laid-back way. For me, it wasn't more or less just getting answers out of them, but it was also seeing the crowd and kind of having them have an opportunity to be able to see, like, oh, these are the people, like, these are the stories behind the whiskey that they're drinking every single day. And I think, for me, I love being able to see the crowd out here and be able to really harness and get some more of those inside details. I think that's really the coolest part, because we're able to bring a lot of the information from really what's happening inside, kind of share that with the world, and they have an opportunity to really understand what goes on behind some of these doors that, when Jackie's sitting here trying to taste and figure out, oh, what's this year's Old Forester birthday bourbon going to be like? We can be able to share that, and that's really what the opportunity here is able to make that happen.
Now, Jordan, I know you've been watching. You've got a panel today, right?
Yeah, my panel is going to be right after this, so stick around.
You got the old-fashioned versus Manhattan.
I do.
And this is one where everyone's always asking me, like, what's your favorite cocktail? And there's this huge debate in, like, the bartending world of what is better for bourbon. Is it the old-fashioned or Manhattan? So where are you going to take this? What can we expect Are you going to push one way or the other?
I don't know. I think everyone really has their own favorite, right? Personal preference, both are great. But I think there's going to be a lot of variation talks. There's
he knows how to toe that party line, doesn't he?
He's making a hard push for vodka soda, so that's going to be...
Okay, listen, no more. This is the last mention of vodka on the stage.
That's better. We all know
that. I'm Manhattan.
No. Okay, no.
Right, there you go.
That panel hasn't started yet, but I'm going to say this because
Here's the line,
I won't
Jackie.
be able to say this later, and I'm going to cross that line and back and forth multiple times today. But in my previous life, before being a part of the Old Forester team, I was a beverage director, and I had to train bartenders across different states, across different bars, and I would always tell them with their Manhattan. So, and with any cocktail, you stir it, you taste it to make sure your dilution's correct, right? You taste, and you taste, and you taste, until you get to the point with the Manhattan where it tastes like absolute shit, and then you did it right, because that's a Manhattan.
Wow.
We're starting the day off.
Oh, there we go. All right, the talk. There we go.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is fantastic.
Catch the duel behind stage here after this is over.
And that concludes Old Fashioned versus Manhattan.
Wow. So you've also been watching the seminars. What's caught your eye?
Yeah, I think there's been, this festival's been great. Great music, great talks. I think we had Kenny, you're up here yesterday with Wes Anderson dropping some knowledge about the forthcoming Bottle and Bond Rye for Angel's Envy. And it's just been a great place to, hear some music in the background. You're going to hear a lot of good, influential bourbon things. But it's also one of the few festivals. Go back to the big bourbon tent, grab a bourbon. Master distillers just walking around. They just want to say hi, grab a drink. It's awesome. It's definitely one of the few places that you can see something like this. So I'm glad we're all here to experience that.
Now, one of the panels I moderated was with the Van Winkle family, and they dropped
all the juicy secrets.
It came out.
They, of course, Preston Van Winkle said that they had hired lawyers and worked with Facebook to shut down the secondary market. What's everybody's take on that?
How long's this panel? No,
we're not on the radar, are we?
No, yeah. I'll jump in. It's something we've discussed a lot, and that was always kind of the rumor, and not the rumor, but Buffalo Trace, Sazerac company would always say, they hated the secondary market and all this stuff. So to get the confirmation that, they were spending millions of dollars, I don't think, we are in the bourbon, I always call it nerd world of people who talk way too much about it, but I don't think they like that, Love it or hate the secondary market, it helped build a lot of these brands and build a lot of the hype and everything else. So then you're also attacking it at the same time. And I always go back to, if I can't find a bottle at retail, so my only option is just not to drink it at all because the supply is just so small compared to the demand. At least, you could have that secondary market, and nobody likes flipping, but it was a lot more than that.
Well, and I think people always assumed that they liked the secondary market because no one would buy Weller Special Reserve if it weren't for the secondary market and the hype, the artificial hype that's created.
Well, I think it's important that we separate Sazerac from the Van Winkle family. I think it's very important here because what I took away from that conversation yesterday, that they really felt the secondary market damaged them, and they felt that they were victims of retailers jacking the prices up and everything, and they didn't have a solution other than go to the bar. But at the same time, Preston kept saying, we're not the ones getting that money. We're not the ones getting that money. And then they brought up counterfeiting.
So I think that was interesting, right? I think there was a little bit of, it was clear they wanted to get some of that money, but more so when you read some of the blowback online today, it was a lot of folks were wondering, instead of spending the money on lawyers to shut down the secondary, put that money towards counterfeiting measures. Try and make bottles a little bit safer. It's going to take place no matter what. You might as well make it safer for the consumer so that they know what they're getting is actually going to be the product they put out. Put your resources towards something that's going to do well for the consumer.
Kitty, I haven't really been online to see what the response has been, other than who's tagged me on Twitter. But what's it been like? I know you track that stuff.
Within a few hours after posting, I think we had almost 200 comments on the picture of people kind of giving their take on it. And I think what Preston said and being able to go against counterfeiting is it's a real thing. If somebody actually tries to go out there's counterfeit bourbon on the market. People can buy foils from China, and you can reseal them. You can do a lot of different stuff, and they do that. Now, when I look at it, I thought the secondary market was healthy, but it's also become unhealthy. If he says that we're trying to stop counterfeits, and maybe that is one portion of it, and I think another party is saying he wants the money, or somebody has to have that money. Well, at the end of the day, the way this is going to work out, it's just the retailers are going to make the money, because if they're going to be pricing it at secondary prices, they're the ones making the money. So I see potentially the future of how this could eventually shift is if the three-tier system has a rapid change and there's more direct from the manufacturer to the consumer market available.
Yeah, but the retail industry is going to block that, and the wholesale industry will block that as much as they can. One thing that I also took away from the Van Winkles was how much anger there was toward this subject. I mean, I don't know if you could feel it, but I could feel it coming off of Preston.
I mean, it was 93 degrees out here yesterday.
Yeah, but he was really, and it's like he wanted to get that off of his chest. He really did.
Which I'm sure they get a ton of blowback from all of that, of people mad that they can't find their bourbon, and then it's kind of the easy target is to say, oh, I can't find Pappy Van Winkle because the secondary market. Whether or not that's true, I'm sure I'd be frustrated too. I just think it was probably, maybe not where they wanted to aim the anger directly at the secondary market. I think there's a lot of other issues behind that than just reselling.
Well, and you have to remember too. So Pappy's about to drop pretty soon in the coming weeks and months. So they must be getting it constantly. When am I going to be able to find it? It's too expensive, and that just probably boils up right towards the fall. So that's all bubbling towards the top of their mind right now. And it was just prime time for that to come out.
Well, I'm very glad they came on the stage because they didn't have to, and they knew I was gonna. I didn't share any of the questions with them, but they've been with me before, and they know that I ask questions. So
You like to throw a few curveballs every once in a while.
But Preston did admit that he would probably commit a felony if he got in a room with a counterfeiter. And Kenny, we have an upcoming podcast with an admitted counterfeiter who was caught.
Yeah, it's gonna be a juicy one.
Yeah, when we were having that conversation with Preston, that interview that we had with him just kept coming into my mind, of all the things that we saw in the secondary market on counterfeiting. Where do you think we are when it comes to counterfeiting? Is the secondary market going away help it, or does it hurt it? I personally think it might hurt the efforts to stop counterfeiting because there's a pretty good little police force out there.
And that's what I think most people don't understand if you're not deep into the bourbon world as we are, that there are pockets of people that this is what they spend their time and their hobby doing, is actually chasing counterfeits. Now, they're no part of any legal entity or anything like that. That's what they do. They love to be able to shop around on eBay because if you can go on eBay, you'll see empty bottles of Pappy Van Winkle that you can buy. Nobody's buying bottles for $50 to make lamps out of them. I'm sorry, right? They're not doing that, right? They're going away with the purpose. And so what you can do is they spend the time tracking those serial numbers and seeing where they end up, and then they go and basically flame those people that end up trying to sell them at some point, right? And they try to trace it back and figure out exactly where the root actually came from. So there's already a good self-policing community that's already inside of bourbon today.
So Julian, after the seminar was over, he pulled out a big friggin' pocket knife on stage and started cutting the labels. And he's like, this is how we prevent it. And I was like, how the hell did you get that through security? But yeah, so I think this is going to influence our kind of our little community, quite a bit. And for them to come out publicly that they helped shut it down was really something. Another thing that was a first. This was the first public appearance of Marianne Eves since she had left Castle and Key. Did anybody catch her or talk to her while she was on stage?
I got to talk to her back behind here a little bit. It seems like everything's going great. She's got an upcoming TED Talk, which is amazing, right? I mean, I think being able to have that honor is it's an incredible experience, and happy for her and be able to do that. And I think we're all excited to kind of just see what happens next.
And she's had some great experience since she left with rum and tequila and traveling around, and I think we'll see her in a lot of different places in the future.
And of course, she's a Round Table alum, so we're always rooting for Marianne.
So I got a question for you all. So we got some people out here, and we were actually, there was, when we had the Van Winkle thing out there was we sampled 15 year, right? It was an amazing opportunity, amazing experience. Now, not everybody's going to be able to get that opportunity, right? So let's go ahead and everybody can kind of give if you can't get Pappy, what's the next best bourbon that you can drink? There's always those articles that come out and they say, here's 5 bourbons better than Pappy.
Are we talking accessible bourbons?
Yes, let's do that for the crowd and for people that think that they want to try it, but they might want some steps to be able to get down that path.
So it's only in 6 markets, so maybe that doesn't make it completely accessible, but for those of you who are here from out of state, Kentucky is one of the markets. Four Roses has a new small batch select is what they call it. It's 104 proof, it's about $50. I think it's my top new bourbon of the year. You should be able to find it in again, these 6 markets. It competes with some really tough bourbons. My maybe one of my second favorites is Old Forester 1920, which is a higher proof than that. So you really got to go to which profile you prefer. But if you haven't had the small batch select yet, that's what I'd go for.
Yeah, I think it's it's a pretty tough comparison because when we're talking about weeded bourbons with a lot of age on it, there's just not much on the market that compares or is anywhere near available. But one I would suggest is Wilderness Trail actually has a weeded bourbon that they're releasing, and it's obviously on the age it's not even close because I think they're bottling around 4 to 5 years, but we were there the other day and really great product. So if you need a weeded bourbon and looking for something a little higher proof, I'd say give Wilderness Trail a try.
I think you also, because you made Poor Man's Pappy famous, so you've got to talk about really what does it make, or what are the components of Poor Man's Pappy, and then
and can you even find those components anymore?
No, that's the thing. You can't even make.
Where the ninja comes in.
Yeah. So this was, I wrote a blog post probably, I think it was around 2013, about the Poor Man's Pappy. I don't know if I came up with the actual name. I'm pretty sure I did, but I definitely stole the blend from somebody else and put my own name on it. But it's just 60% Weller 12.
Weren't we just talking about counterfeiting?
You can't trademark a blend. No, so it's a blend of 60% Weller 12 and 40% Weller Antique, and you get somewhere around that 10-year mark and around the 107 proof, or excuse me, 100 proof.
Yeah, around there.
Whatever it is. I need to look at the article, but. So then,
you have to refer to your own stuff all the time.
I try to take things a step nerdier.
People don't get it. It's really hard to remember your own writing sometimes.
It is. It is. So take it a step nerdier is I put a blind tasting together of the, a fresh Pappy or, fake Pappy soak, and then, Weller 12, real Pappy, and then a version that I put in a blend tech and blended up. And every single time I've done this, the blended bourbon, like literal blended bourbon, has won the blind tasting. So I don't know what it is, the aeration, whatever it is. I also stole that from a
The master taster is saying yes. It's the aeration.
Kind of talk about what does aeration do to it, because it was funny because we had a blind taste off, and I think you sent us 10 samples, and we were all like, "Damn, this is really good." And then you pulled it out, and it was literally like from a Ninja blender. He had bourbon in it.
So if you want a 4,000-gallon Ninja blender, we need that.
Yeah, so some of my favorite barrels in the warehouse are actually the lowest yield barrels because they've had so much headspace, so much airspace in there. And there are some arguments out there that once you've gone through the distillation process, your liquid in and of itself has been oxidized to the point that it could ever be oxidized after going through all of the industrial process. Once you get into the barrel, though, what they're not taking into consideration is the extraction of different compounds from that actual wood and creating new compounds that can then also be oxidized. So I love the low yield barrels. If I could just mingle all the low yield barrels together into a blend, which may or may not be coming soon one day.
You heard it here
but
first.
that's exactly what's going on. So the same way that you would decant a really heavy tannic red wine to soften out that tannin, it's the exact same thing that's going on when you're going through a blender at home with your bourbon.
By the way, I want to say something about Jackie. She's a champion for the people when it comes to whiskey. My pick for like one of the it's not a bourbon, it's a rye. It's the Old Forester rye. I'm just in love with the Old Forester rye right now, and I would buy that. I buy cases regularly, unfortunately. And
it's like a horrible problem.
I have an Old Forester rye problem. But one of the things that's really cool about that rye whiskey is it's $23, and her management wanted to actually make it be like double or triple the price, right? And she fought for it to be $23. She intimidated presidents and vice presidents of Brown-Forman to keep it at $23.
Not that scary. Really not. No, but I think it's very important.
But isn't that awesome?
The mafioso or the mafiesa of Old Forester over here.
Mafias?
Jackie will straight cut you.
Mafias. No, I will not. I'm not a violent person. I'm not. No, but I think it's very important for us to stand strong as a brand that has always long been known as the sort of really great quality product, but doesn't have to be a fuss about it. So Old Forester is known as one of the best bangs for your buck, and we need to stay consistent with that regardless of what the trends are doing. So.
And it's Louisville's house bourbon for those who aren't from around here. That's what we call it.
Yeah, but thank you for keeping it at $23. Jordan, I don't think you got a chance to say which one you would pick.
Not because Jackie's here, but we get that question a lot from a lot of people. And in terms of just available bourbons, we often recommend 1920. It's it's about $60, give or take, right around there, and you can usually find it in the stores, and people just tend to love it. So it's one that we tend to stock up on in Breaking Bourbon and introduce a lot of people to, and it's great. But really, what we always tell people too is, Pappy's going to be what you make a Pappy, right? So if you have a bourbon that you absolutely love, just stick with it. There's nothing wrong with that. Buy what you love, drink what you love, and don't let anyone else tell you what's going to be better.
Until the damn brands change it, like lower the age statement or
until that takes place.
Use lesser quality barrels for something else. Ah, God, that pisses me off. I hate it when they do that.
I know, we could have a whole grind your gears
I
session
know.
up here, couldn't we?
We're never getting off the stage.
session.
We're just going to be here a little bit.
I'm Kenny Coleman, and this is Grind Your Gears.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of give my take on that as well, because I think we had talked about some wheated bourbons and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of the Maker's 46 private select program. The fact that there are 1,001 different combinations of what's out there, meaning that you can go to a lot of different stores, you can sample a lot of different ones, and they have a lot of different varying profiles. The one that Larry had brought in here yesterday, and I think most of us can say that today it is probably the only bourbon that's out there that can probably come close to tasting dusty-ish, right? So anybody that's unfamiliar, dusty, it's 70s, 80s. It's got a tax stamp on it. Nobody knows why it has this kind of flavor profile to it. Jackie hates it. We've been down this road before. Most of us up here enjoy it. However, I think that the Maker's 46 Private Select program gives any consumer out there the opportunity to try something in a wheated mash bill, but have a lot of varying differences because they have all the different flavoring staves.
That's a great pick. And unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our
weigh in on what I would
roundtable.
suggest.
Oh, here we go.
No one
here we
cares
go.
about Jackie's opinion.
Well, okay, but you have to pick outside of Old Forester.
But I'm not going to, because it is the 1920.
She'll cut you.
It is. So in fairness, I drank the least of the 1920 because I drink barrel strength for a job on such a regular basis that I got to be kind to my liver. However, the 1920.
Humble brag.
No, it is when it's a job. Like
Hey,
whatever.
it's
a job
not-
that
it's
I'm
not
doing.
bragging if it's
not.
true,
It's
Kenny.
just what it is. Don't be
Muhammad
jealous.
Ali
Don't be
said that.
jelly. But the 1920 is a very unique higher proof expression in that it actually holds balance as you dilute through it. So even if you're not a high proof drinker, you can adjust it accordingly to where you want it to taste best at. There's a lot of high proof whiskeys on the market that once you start watering it back, they fall apart or defects start to come
so
to
true.
fruition. Yes, a lot of distilleries will hide subpar barrels, like you were saying. They start putting someone like just throw it in there, in some of these high proof blends because you cannot discern defects at high alcohol concentrations.
Boom.
So,
Now you have to pick something outside Old Forester. Got to do it.
I once did the single barrel pick from Four Roses. It was a barrel strength single barrel pick. It was with Doc Rose before I
Okay.
took this job, and it had the best cordial cherry, amazing flavor profile. It was exquisite. It was super, super low proof. It was tucked away in a nice, cool spot. It's the Hunter S. Thompson single barrel if you guys go into Doc's and try one, but I have a case of it at home.
Is it laced with LSD?
No.
Be cooler if it was.
So we've got to start getting ready for the next panel, but as we do that, let's go ahead and tell everybody where to find you, like social media.
I'll start first. So Bourbon Pursuit, so you can find us. We are a weekly podcast you can download, open up your phone, open up the your podcasting app, type in the word bourbon. We'll probably be up there in the top results. Go ahead and subscribe. It's a weekly release, and we have Tuesdays. We come out with a 60-second whiskey review as well. We talk about everything from having people like Jackie on the shows, multiple-time alumni. We've had master distillers. We talk about bourbon culture, such as topics like today. And most of these guys are always regulars on it, too. So it's always fantastic.
Yeah, so Jordan from Breaking Bourbon. You can find us at Breaking Bourbon or breakingbourbon.com. We are the leading resource for whiskey reviews and bottle release calendars.
Yeah, I'm Blake from Bourboner. That's Bourbonr. I got made fun of last night by Lauren, who has to edit this because of how I spell out the name every time. So I want to throw that out there. But yeah, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just look for Bourboner.
And I'm Brian with Sippin' Corn. You can find me. The blog name is Sippin' Corn. Also Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and also you search for bourbonjustice.com and you'll go to my website as well.
Bourbon Justice. So I'm the curator of the festival and editor-in-chief of Bourbon Plus magazine and proud co-host on Bourbon Pursuit. But this is to me, this is the future of like whiskey media. I invited everyone up here because I appreciate what they're doing to continue the whiskey education, which is often lacking. And so I've been trying to use Bourbon and Beyond as a way to help some great minds in whiskey share their knowledge.
How do you find me? Well, darling, you can find me emceeing this stage for the rest of the day. Other than that, pop down to the Old Forester Distillery. Sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm, I don't know, somewhere else. But you can find me on Instagram at Jackie Zyken and peek into my personal life.
That's Zyken, like hiking.
Awkward. Hey.
And I cannot believe I just
You
straight
totally
skipped you.
skipped me.
That was very rude
That's
of me.
okay. You're going to get sick of hearing from me by the end of today.
Jackie's the best, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.